Hello, everyone. Today on our Identity in 15 video, we're going to talk about MFA and how does it help. To get started, I'm Andrew Donnells. I'm a lead DevRel engineer on the developer relations team here at WSO2. And let's talk about multi-factor authentication. That's what we mean when we say MFA. You hear that? Multi-factor authentication is just an extension of a basic authentication, right? So you're used to username and password on just about every single website these days, but we want authentication factors on top of that. And how can we do that, right? So we want to be able to identify the user by something more than just username and password. What we're going to be looking at is a user has something that they know that can identify them. They have something they have with them that can identify them, or something that they are that can identify them. And that's what's going to feed into what multi-factor auth can leverage to guarantee that the person sitting behind the controls is the person who's logging into the account. So what we describe these as is knowledge factors. So a person's, what they know is their knowledge factor. So that's where questions, right? So when you have to fill out, who your favorite pet was or things like that, that's something but other people might know that, or you might have written that down somewhere or accidentally shared that on social media or something like that. So those knowledge factors aren't as unique to you as they possibly could be. So that second area is our possession factors. So just like when you walk into a building that has a physical key, that's something you possess. And that kind of aligns authentication with owning something or having been granted the authorization to hold that thing. And so a mobile phone, a cryptographic FIDO key, that's something that a user can possess that guarantees that user is who they say they are. The last area we call inherence factors. So something inherent about a person that you can't really give away, you can't really change easily. It's just there because it's them. Fingerprints are the kind of de facto way throughout all of life to identify somebody. You can get really crazy, obviously, with dental records and things. But for web authentication, fingerprints, Face ID, that type of new tech is what is inherently assigned to somebody, right? That's not something you can just give to somebody else. Somebody has to have you physically, or you have to be sitting in front of the device in order to inherently describe and allow that. So how can those things help improve security on the web or in an app? So now that we know how we can identify people and what some of those factors are, right? Maybe we've identified who needs to have extra authentication. So you might have a few different roles in your application or in your industry, and some jobs with that role. And so a staff member, an intern, might do similar jobs that aren't necessarily very secure, but an intern might not be as trusted because they're temporary. They're just a recent hire. They haven't been proven as long as a staff member. Similarly, a manager might have more sensitive tasks to do inside of an application. So an intern or manager might need to log in using a username and password, but also have a secondary key, a secondary possession factor to be able to log in to the application, because they either aren't as trusted or they have more responsibility, and therefore they need that extra factor. Whereas a staff member who's there every day, may not need that extra security. Similarly, so if you have different types of requests, you can leverage multi-factor authentication. Really helps by restricting sensitive transactions, right? So if a user just wanted to view a balance or review some information, but they're not going to change anything, they're not going to make any edits, then that's probably fine. Maybe they just need to know the username and password, and that's okay. But if there's something sensitive, and knowing the username and password might allow someone nefarious to get in and do something that is damaging, like a funds transfer of some kind, that's when you would want to increase the security and add those other factors of authentication to protect that. Another good way to identify when a user is more vulnerable or less vulnerable is by the device that they're using and then where they're using that device. So if a user is on a desktop environment and they're in a country or at an IP address that is common, right, their home IP address, something like that, then maybe they don't need, a FIDO key or a fingerprint auth or something like that. And they can just use a password manager and they can log in and kind of get out of the way of them logging into applications. But if they're traveling or if all of a sudden someone's trying to authenticate from a foreign country or on a mobile device, say, then maybe the username and password credentials have been compromised and someone's trying to access that from a different IP or a different location, in which case, we want to flag that and say, no, you need to add separate factors, fingerprints, possession factors, or inherence factors to authenticate that session. So we prove that, no, someone just got on a train and went to a different country and it is them, they're just in a different place. So a lot of the ways that this decision happens is what we call conditional authentication. So conditional authentication is steering how much authentication we have for a given user based on these conditions that we've been talking about. And so in the demo we're going to see here in a second, we're going to have the basic username and password authentication method, which could be any authentication method, whether that was an email link or a social login of some kind, right? And then a second step, we're going to have to use a phone to log in for a time-based one-time password. But all the different cases can be used because the conditions can be set up to cater to the exact specific situation that your application might need. So from there, I want to go straight into, this is an application that I have set up on Asgardeo. So I have my application here for just simple onboarding of some kind, right? And I'm in the sign-in method section of this application. And Asgardeo is really nice. It just gives me really quick templates to do the things that I know I need to do anyways. So I want to add that time-based one-time password as a second factor. And just automatically, it's going to tell me, I've added this conditional auth section with both of these factors that I can modify if need be. I'm not going to want to. So we're just going to continue going and looking. So now I have my basic username and password for my users, but I added this additional step for time-based one-time password that all users will be required to provide when logging in. So I'm going to go ahead and update that, and that's going to save this sign-in method for this onboarding application. And we're going to do that. We're here. So here's my onboarding application. This is just a really, really simple site. And I'm going to go ahead and try to log in. And it's going to say, okay, you need to log in. So here's this first factor. Here's that username, password, credentials. I'm going to sign in. And additional factors, this is kind of secondary. This is more for making sure that the user isn't a bot, because this is just kind of like a human task. But it is also a factor of authentication, right? Because bots can cause damage just like users can cause damage. So I don't have a authentication set up for this user yet. So I'm going to open up my WSO2 Authenticator app. But you can use anything like Google Auth or any other authenticator app. And I'm scanning that secret. And I'm going to continue. And now it's going to ask me for the code that I have in here. 608. And so even though I'm live streaming to you and you could see that code is now changing every single time. So if someone needs to get in this account, now Bob Test at Gmail is logged in with that other factor, but no one else can log in after me, even though you just watched. By the time someone sees this and tries, if this was a live site, right, they would need that other factor which is on my phone and only authenticated to my phone in order to be able to get in. And then what I want to do now is go to the My Account page so we can see for Bob in my security profile, I have this authenticator app set up. And so if I wanted to change to a different phone, right, if I got a new phone or whatever, I could use my phone and scan this here and then re-verify that new phone. So it allows me to manage, those possession factors so that if someone hacks into a database somewhere or I use a weak password, right, like I'm still in control even if someone else gains access. And also I can go ahead and just delete the QR code if I want to. That way someone would have to re-authenticate a new device. And that is it. So I think we'll come back to the end of the presentation. So I think right now, if you're watching live, I see the chat room. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, I'll do my best to try to answer any of those questions as they come in. I also want to mention we'll be doing another Identity in 15 chat next week, I believe the 25th. So be looking out on social for when that's going to start. And then obviously all of our community releases, whether it's blog posts or anything, are always coming out. So definitely be on the lookout for any of those new content. Doesn't look like there are any questions or comments out there in chat. So if that's it, then I'll just say thank you for everyone for joining. And again, catch us next week or come and hang out in with any of our community engagements. And I'll see you around. Have a good one. Bye.